Awesome. So our next item is item 10, a verbal update on the Chilean needlegrass. Thank you.
Just a bit of context and welcome to the team. I think you know Mark, Acting Manager Biosecurity, Alice, who does our plant pest management, and Anthony, who does skiing, gravel stuff. But they'll run through their work shortly. There's a little bit of activity in this space that you may have heard about. It's been on the go for some time, came to a head recently. We thought we'd bring you a bit of an update, some context, so that you're able to respond to inquiries or questions or comments that you might be getting from the public, or in particular contractors, gravel extractors at this point. So I'll hand over to the team and they'll run you through it.
Cool, thank you. So I'll just give you a bit of an update. So just a bit of an overview of Chilean needlegrass in general. So Chilean needlegrass is a pest plant and it can have significant impacts on the areas which it invades. It reduces pasture and crop yields and it's unpalatable to stock when seeding. And the seeding time is generally between November and February if it wasn't controlled. It's also a major animal welfare issue. The seed is literally like a needle and will penetrate stocks, pelts. It will also go into dog skin and the like. So yeah, it's a nasty weed in terms of animal welfare. So it is a pest in the regional pest management plan, and there are restrictions on land uses and material moving off properties, and I'll just outline that a bit further in the next slide. And the Chilean needlegrass seed unfortunately remains viable in the soil for over 20 years. And there's no current tool to eradicate this plant. Spraying only kills the growing grass that you physically spray. It doesn't kill the seed in the soil. And importantly, it's spread by stock through the movement of hay, silage and stock feed, if that was to occur. But in this context of gravel extraction, it can be spread through the movement of machinery, by the seed getting stuck on the machinery moving off-site and elsewhere, or through the soil, gravel or silt itself. So Chilean needlegrass is currently present in Hawke's Bay, Marlborough and Canterbury. And significant resources have been invested nationally looking at control tools such as biocontrol, chemical control, looking at land use change, and also vector pathway management, how this grass is moved around the country. So if you have a look at the map, the red circles show the known occurrences of Chilean needlegrass in New Zealand, and then the green colouring shows the optimal, suitable and marginal areas that it could infest if the seed were to get there. So that's a good proportion of New Zealand that is at threat of having Chilean needlegrass invade. So Chilean needlegrass is a pest of national significance, and the rest of New Zealand definitely does not want this weed. So in Hawke's Bay, it inhabits approximately 600 hectares on over 200 properties, and we are dealing with all those property owners on a yearly basis. It inhabits the areas of Central Hawke's Bay, Maraikako, Puketapu, Bayview and some other satellite areas, and it's been in Hawke's Bay since approximately the 1930s. So as I mentioned, it is a pest under the Pest Management Plan, and there are rules for land occupiers that have this plant. So the Chilean needlegrass must be controlled before it sets seed each year, unless the management plan is entered into with the Hawke's Bay Regional Council. And also no person shall move any goods contaminated with the Chilean needlegrass seed beyond their property boundary. So that could be through the likes of movement of soil or hay or the like. So where you have a subdivision occurring, no soil can be moved off that subdivision if there's Chilean needlegrass there, and all the machinery that goes off the property needs to be washed down and inspected by a biosecurity advisor. So in early 2019, we became aware of Chilean needlegrass being present in the lower reaches of the Tukituki River. Due to the cryptic nature of the plant, you can only survey for Chilean needlegrass when it has its seed up, and unfortunately it was losing its seed then when we found it then. So we had to wait till December of that year to finish that survey. And that completed survey showed that Chilean needlegrass was infesting areas throughout the Tukituki and Waipawa rivers. So in Waipawa River, it's from Stockade Road down to the confluence of the Tukituki River, and then on the Tukituki River from the river confluence right down to the river mouth. So in June 2019, we put additional consent conditions in place for gravel extractors to try and work with them and to try and to mitigate the risks of Chilean needlegrass seed being spread. So some of those conditions included notifying the recipients of the material that potentially it could contain Chilean needlegrass, but probably most importantly was that the end users must be limited to so that is to minimise the risk of spreading the seed. So such end uses as concrete, using it in concrete or in foundation material did occur. In March 2020, we then held a workshop for gravel extractors, and so this was so they had a better understanding of the biology of the plant, the impacts it has, but also understanding why we put these consent conditions in place. Unfortunately, in May 2020, due to some non-compliance with these consent conditions being observed, we then issued a notice of direction, which is under the Biosecurity Act. So that just further cemented these consent conditions and I suppose gave it an additional legal framework there. We continue to work with gravel extractors, but in December late last year, we became aware of further non-compliance even after the notice of direction was issued, and we also became aware of further risks even for those who were complying with the rules, that potentially some Chilean needlegrass was being Chilean needlegrass seed was being spread, such as foundations, the material being laid in foundations, and then, for instance, it not being concreted over for whatever reason, the project might have fallen over. So, yeah, there's the potential for that needlegrass to come up in those sites. And so to us, the risks associated with allowing gravel extraction to continue were too great. And so we decided to put that complete ban in place late last year. So the current situation is we're working closely with contractors to find alternative sites for them to continue extraction that's outside of the Chilean needlegrass areas. We also held a workshop with the affected consent holders to look at the issues and their concerns and to try and work through these. And I'm in regular discussions with the National Chilean Needlegrass Partnership about this issue and wider issues regarding this pest. There's also an exemption process for gravel extractors to apply for if they wish under the Biosecurity Act. So that is for them to use the gravel that they've currently got in stockpiles, but not to extract further material. So there is strict criteria around that must be met, and currently two have applied for and received the exemptions under that process. We're also working with the HBRC communications team closely. We did a Facebook post a week or 2 weeks ago, and that reached 21,000 people, which was excellent. And we've done media releases that have been picked up by various outlets that have highlighted this issue and highlighted the ban. So we have commenced a work package to mitigate and manage these risks further, with the aim of hopefully allowing gravel extraction to continue, but so there is no risk of moving Chilean needlegrass seed from those infested sites. And so until we're happy with those processes being put in place, no further gravel extraction will occur in those areas that has Chilean needlegrass. So now I'll hand over to Anthony.
Thank you. Tēnā koutou. Yeah, I'm here representing the Regional Assets section and specifically the flood control schemes team and the engineering in terms of the river management and the impact that the Chilean needlegrass issue has had on the Regional Council. So a quick overview, orientation here of that area, of that map you've seen before, but I just want to take you through that Lower Tuki, Middle, Upper Tuki, and look at that Upper Tuki catchment through in the following slides. So these maps, I'm not sure how familiar you'll be with the graphs there are allocations, what we use to determine allocations when we issue gravel consents. So they're cross sections leading, so this is the Lower Tuki, starting from the coast there up to Redbridge. and it shows that it is below grade. There's a deficit there, 745,000 cubic metres below grade, and there's no allocated. We had some requests, so this is for the last year survey. So if we move up, just a bit jumpy there, to the middle Tuki, Red Bridge to Tamumu Bridge, there's no grade line that's been established there, so we're not actually sure on the availability. It's quite a narrow, sort of gorgy section. We are looking to do that, but we have allocated in the last year 42,000 cubic metres, so those people were affected by the ban. And then the Upper Tuki, so the Chile needlegrass is on the Tuki and the Waipawa, down the lower reaches there. So I'll take you through that. We have allocated 640,000 cubes in the last for this financial year. Most of that is above the Chile needlegrass area. And I'll just comment there that we've got those projects that are managing it. We've got our gravels, there's a 369 project, the Upper Tuki scheme 265, and we've got that IRG funding, new funded project working in this area in the Upper Tuki. So there's just a few things happening. So if I go to the Upper Tuki now, so you can see the Chile needlegrass area in that lower reach up to Walker Road, cross section 9. And there's a considerable amount of gravel there, 665. We haven't been too concerned about it. It's where it goes into that gorge. It hasn't really been causing a major issue for it's not a priority, shall we say, for the flood control schemes. But it's more that area above the Tukipo confluence. There's 370 available there, 1,000 available, and you can see the requested and the allocated amounts. It's a bit more active there. So that's where we're investing some efforts into extracting that material to help out with that flood control scheme. So yeah, you can see the ups and downs there. State Highway 50 up the top there, it's low, and around Waipukato, just below Waipukato there, it's quite low as well. So amount allocated is getting considerable there, 245,000. So if we jump over to the Waipawa, so that starts at the confluence of the Tuki. There's a little bit around 9 and 10 at the Waipawa Township. So we had a couple of extractors set up there, processing. So there's a bit of a disruption to those activities. We are encouraging them up above Stockade Road, where you can see that there's some activity and availability. But that's probably the priority for us in this issue, that area from 16 to 25 across sections, where there's 655,000. So we'd like to look at ways to use that material to work through with our biosecurity team, and ways that it could be used potentially in foundations or processing treatment. And the Manganuku, so that's a new one, just starts with the confluence of the Waipawa, just at Stockade Road. This isn't availability, we've just had the survey back last week, and we don't have a grade line, so that's the difference from 1994. So you can see a fair bit of build-up. There's not huge volumes compared to those other rivers, the major rivers, but it is an opportunity where we can do some extraction without having the Chile needlegrass issue. So in summary there, I'm not making excuses, but yeah, it has been difficult to trace the material to recipients. We've got one staff managing the gravel consents. Just to put it in perspective, there's about 70 contractors across Hawke's Bay, 227 sites, about 1.5 million cubic metres of material gets consented each year. So to put it in perspective, that's 240, did a little calculation, 240,000 truck movements. So very difficult to trace that and follow where the material is going. Seeing that as far as Transmission Gully and the wind turbine project down at Featherston there on the Rimatakas. So we don't have any systems in place to track it currently, or any requirements we'll need to until now. So yeah, just a quick summary there on the impacts. We've met with those gravel. There was some disruption to activities, and we got a lot of feedback about that. You may have been involved with that from the Extractors. Fairly political decision in many ways, and disruption to the activities. So they've done quotes on projects like the sports park and some of the New Zealand housing fundings projects. And so those contracts, we haven't been tied up. We weren't promising any prices or anything, but we have those contractors will be affected, and those projects potentially. But we have been moving people, so we've moved from the middle Tukituki to the Nararora and Tutakuri to those areas. There's areas available in gravel. We've been pretty proactive, helping people out there, and also in that lower Waipawa, as I discussed earlier, just above to the upper reaches of the Tukituki, which will be of benefit to the scheme, to the Upper Tuki scheme. And as Alice mentioned, their stockpiles are being managed through the Biosecurity Act exemption process to try to clean up those areas. That's me covered.
Thank you. Mark, did you want to add
No,
anything?
just here, and then I'll speak to the
Okay,
next one.
fantastic. Ian, anything before we
No, the
questions
only thing
asked?
I'd just add is just acknowledge is that there was a huge amount of work by these two in particular pre-Christmas during the holiday period, and more recently working with contractors to get them alternative supply. So just acknowledge the work the staff have done in short order to manage this.
We will have a period of questions before we move to the next item. So, any questions? Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation and for your hard work on this rather vexing issue. I just wanted to make sure I understand the situation. There seemed to be from your graphs 2 areas of overlap between the Chilean needlegrass and areas where we need to have gravel excavated for flood control management purposes, Upper Tuki and Waipawa River. Those are
Correct,
the overlap
yeah.
areas. So what you've done is you've worked with those contractors or those companies that have got consents to extract from those areas and given them a sense that they could go to somewhere else and extract gravel where there isn't the Chilean needlegrass, where we also need to take gravel out. Is that what you've been doing?
Yes, great.
I guess the question I have is, without beating around the bush, is that legal? In other words, they've got consents to extract gravel in area X. Is that consent transferable to area Y? Are we happy that that's all authorised?
We revoked the consent. We understood that was our right. No doubt there has been some discussion among.
No, I don't mean the revocation saying you can't. I mean saying stop doing it there, do it over here. Is it lawful to say you can
Going to the new
extract somewhere else than when they're
so
approved?
if I understand, it's not a resource consent as such. It's a permit issued by council. That's my understanding. And the permit is a delegated authority from us on the basis that we hold the permitted activity status as the river manager.
Right.
So they don't have
It's not
the
a
same
consent
level
as such.
of rights that a normal consent holder would have. That's correct. So we can be directive about where it's taken.
Okay.
In other words, it's not a property right.
Correct.
No, and I'd say we're not direct. We're letting them know there's an opportunity to extract from another location, rather than directing that they specifically go to location.
Because as
X
long as
or-
as long as they can lawfully take from that other location, then that's what I need to know.
Any other questions? Councillor Voss.
Thanks. Yeah, two things. Just if you comment, is the quality of gravel the same all the way up from the various areas we are requesting people go to, rather than where they have been dredging or taking? And then just the first bit you said you placed a ban or conditions and they were broken. And what are the implications for those bans being deliberately or accidentally abused? How is that playing out?
So we tried to work with them initially when it was, I suppose, a legitimate misunderstanding or the like, and then we tried to work with them, but I suppose consent was revoked from them.
Is that the only
And so it
ramification?
is an offence under the Biosecurity Act to knowingly move Chilean needlegrass seed Yeah, but we didn't get to that point of prosecuting under the Biosecurity Act. We were becoming increasingly uncomfortable with the levels of non-compliance, but also, as I said, with even for those that were compliant, there were still risks of moving Chilean needlegrass seed. So I suppose this wasn't all to do with non-compliance, it was to do with identifying further risks as well.
Okay, but the consequence of all of this is actually all the work you're doing, but a lot more transportation for a longer area or for a longer distance, therefore costs in Hawke's Bay go up because of that. And that may was going to happen anyway, given the volumes that you've just described. So be interested in any comment on that further. But anyway, the question on the grade, is the grade of gravel the same all the way up? Of the rock?
No. So it'll generally get smaller and finer, and there'll be different uses as it travels down. We're going more to the concrete rather than the crushing further up. Those generally better higher quality further upstream. But that it will be part of the IRG project where we're looking at the types of uses, but that is not really a consideration for the regional council. The types of we provide the availability, and then the contractors, extractors, they decide the end use, where they want to go, where they want to transport is another big issue. So we have been encouraging them for many years to go down to the Apatuki scheme, those areas, and the demand is more around that Hastings Napier urban area for it. So that is a project we've been working on to encourage people down there. But we are seeing all across North Island that there's a lot more movement now, and Hawke's Bay is probably in a better position than a lot of regions in terms of availability, so hence the movement.
So there's massive stockpiles at Morakakaho, which have taken a few operators bankrupt over the years. Are they kind of quarantined, as you were saying earlier, or are they available?
Not
That
tomorrow,
isn't-
okay.
They're on,
Not
it's
been
on the
identified.
NADA rule, isn't it?
Yeah, yes it is.
Yeah, okay. So
They're
that's
the
just
massive
the area
ones.
where Chilean needlegrass has been found.
Oh, so they are
Yeah.
quarantined.
We're going to have to move.
No, they're not.
Or not? So they're available?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
thanks.
So we've got a few questions to come. So Councillor Barker, then Fenbake, then Foley, then Graham. So let's keep them short, please.
Just some rumblings around the traps about the allocation of access to the gravel. Some people seem to feel that some extractors are given access to large amounts which they camp on and use, and others are then kept out of the ability to extract gravel. Are you aware of this as an issue? And if so, what are your plans to try and have an allocation regime which seems to be fair? It will never be fair because some will always feel that they're shortchanged, but it seems to be fair.
So we do have a work stream looking at that and working with the extraction industry to determine a fair model. I think it's quite simple in theory, but a bit more challenging in practice. So we're actively working with them. And we're also aware that some extractors request and get permission for a certain amount of volume and then don't utilise that in a particular year. So we're also trying to understand how we can counter those sorts of behaviours. So it's an active piece of work, and we're certainly working with industry, and all the major players are contributing to that piece of work as well. Okay.
Councillor Fenbake.
Yeah, just thinking a little bit long term. Chilean needlegrass, the spraying, the killing of it, is it a specific product that actually kills only that? Or is it actually you use a broad spectrum that will kill everything around it?
So to kill the plant kind of then and there, or within a week, a glyphosate is used, so that kills everything. However, there's another spray called Task Force, and that is, ideally it's kind of broad sprayed on an area with a lot of Chilean needlegrass, and how that works is it kills seed that germinates in the next 2 to 3 years. And we're finding that working differently on different soil types, but it only kills the germinating seed. So for all the rest of the seed being sitting in the soil, it doesn't kill that. So control tools are definitely lacking for Chilean needlegrass.
But there is work being done to look around the world, where we...
Yes, and looking at biocontrol. Lanky Research is currently looking at rust that potentially could be brought in. There's issues around whether that rust will work on the strain in Hawke's Bay, though, unfortunately.
But you're working long term, because at some stage it will be preferential to actually preferable to have it all gone, if that would be possible. Do you think that is possible?
With the current tools we've got, it's not possible.
No.
But hopefully in the future, research is always being done on it, so hopefully in the future something comes down, or at least so it's reduced greatly. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bowling.
Yeah, apologies, Chair, I've just got a bit of a list here. And
To be expected.
you said the Chilean needlegrass has been in Hawke's Bay since 1930, so I was quite surprised by that. I didn't realise it's been around so long. So how long has the council been actively controlling the...
That's a good question. If I was to guess, I'd probably say mid-90s.
Yeah, early to mid-90s, but
Yeah.
we could get back to you on that when
Yeah.
it's first appeared.
And maybe on the trends, what you perceive the trend of the spread is? Yeah, okay.
So, the reason that's important is we're already dealing with quite a substantial infestation.
Yeah, exactly. So,
hectares.
so my next question leading on to that is how confident are you that outside of the areas you've banned, that it's not further upriver?
In the rivers. Yeah, so we need to do further surveying. And of course, it depends on the extent of infestations. It's relatively easy to find a large infestation, but if it's just one or two plants, it can be very difficult. And because it doesn't always pop up in the same place each year, but we are doing continual surveying of private property surrounding known infestations, but also of the rivers. And so we'll be extending that survey work.
Okay, great. I think you answered it, but impact on the new gravel extraction project that's getting underway for the whole Upper Tuki scheme.
Yeah.
You don't think it's going to impact on that?
We're working very closely. It has impacted on it already. The plan would have been to take probably from that area, on the Waipawa in particular. So we're working with the team there, and it's possibly using some of that funding to contribute to the research, to look at options. They're contributing to those pads we're moving out in other areas, and there might be other solutions, ways to get the gravel out and in a use that reduces the risk of spreading the Chilean needlegrass.
There are some positives and some negatives. So we're working on the basis there's no Chilean needlegrass in the Upper Tuki area, and that may change, but at the moment it's effectively pushing more extractors to the area, to the priority area for the river management. So that is a small bonus. And we're utilising the funding from IRG to open up a lot of the Upper Tuki with access. And we're also, as Ant said, got a work stream looking at work practices, so hopefully we can get an approved work practice so we can re-enter the areas where we're currently not allowed. So that'll be ongoing, and we don't know the outcome of that.
The other advantage is we may be able to select the contractor through that project, and we can't do it as easily in this situation. So we may have more control over the destination, the recipients under that project, under the IRG project.
Yeah, so, so finally just the actual gravel extractors, obviously huge disruption to all those operators, and you talked about moving them. I assume you haven't moved every single one to a new location. I guess just what reassurance can you give them today, guys that have made huge investments in machinery and the like, that are probably stuck in a bit of limbo at the moment?
Yeah, there were 7 contractors that had consents to extract that were affected. Those 2 up by Waipawa are probably the most settled, shall we say, in that location. I think they've made the decision themselves to pack up and move. But massive risk that we're in that area. So we haven't been able to give a lot of assurance. We've said it'll be a couple months away before we can make a decision. It's a temporary ban at the moment on extraction, and we're working through those stockpiles and trying to find other areas and work with them. But that's about it in terms of assurance at the moment.
We did hold a workshop with them and talk through their concerns and issues, and discuss them, even working with each other to try and help manage the situation.
Headline is there is material available elsewhere, so we're not in a position where there's no gravel to extract. It just obviously impacts them commercially if they've got sensitivity around the cost to extract.
we just have some clarity from the chair around consent or permit that's being used?
So it's definitely not from the chair.
Oh, my sorry, from the CD.
I know my place. Look, as we described earlier on, we tend to use the term consent as shorthand internally, but it is a permit and not a resource consent that is issued. So, to my knowledge, I don't think anybody has a resource consent in the region to extract gravel. I don't know whether.
Except the asset management group is about to receive a global consent.
Global consent.
For the rivers.
And the reason for that is that up until now we've operated under permitted activity rules, so broad rules under the Regional Resource Management Plan that enable us to undertake a range of activities as part of our river control functions, and we made a decision several years ago when Chris arrived that...
it was even, 2017 we commenced that process.
We really needed to have hold a resource consent in our own right rather than rely on that permitted activity rules, so that we've been through the process we would expect any other party in the community to go through by way of an assessment of environmental effects and consent conditions and all those sorts of things, which enables our regulatory team to undertake compliance and hopefully not have necessary enforcement action of our own asset management team. So it's just putting some real rigour around that. And once we hold that consent, then we will then continue to issue permits under that.
It's interesting that Rule 74, James, says that the large-scale riverbed gravel extraction is a restricted discretionary activity. So I have been involved in the process before, and I did understand that we, on an annual basis, allocated what were called resource consents, and they were effectively rolled over. I've obviously got that understanding wrong, but I'm still not clear on the point, to be honest.
I think we'll have another time for conversation on this. But I think I'll just stick to James. Yeah. So a question, Councillor?
We're spending a lot of time on gravel extraction, and you know, I know that's on the front of your minds because, of course, all the economic ramifications of it. But clearly, this Chilean needlegrass spreads a whole lot of other ways, and I'm really interested in that because it seems that we're losing this battle. You know, over the years that I've been here, the area has increased. It's really good. It's positive that you've found a really good pre-emergent, but you're saying that, you know, it'll only go for 3 years and you need more, and maybe science will help us out in the future. But I am interested, has anyone done an economic assessment of this, you know, if it spreads even more? I mean, I presume cockies can't move their sheep.
Yeah.
Why would you buy sheep from an infested area?
Yeah, so I believe there has been an economic study, not specifically on Hawke's Bay, but within New Zealand. I can't recall any figures off that, I'm sorry. But yes, it does have economic implications. Just in regards to your comment about losing the battle, my personal belief is, I disagree with that. Like, we have 600 hectares of Chilean needlegrass in Hawke's Bay. If you look on the map where we've GPSed it, and if you zoom out, there's huge areas that can still be infested. So yeah, 600 hectares is a lot, but compared to some, well, for instance, Canterbury, it is a lot less than that. And also a lot of the infestations we're finding these days, they're not new. They're new to us, but they're not new on the ground. So it's also a ramification of our communications being a lot better with farmers. People know how to identify it. We're getting alerts that it's there, and so that becomes a new property. But generally, the actual infestation is not new. So I agree, it's definitely spreading, and I think to an extent it always will, you know, no matter how many resources we put into it. But yeah, the spread, I don't believe, is absolutely extensive, occurring, you know, rapidly in Hawke's Bay.
So you think you're confident that we can eventually win?
I suppose it depends what winning is. To me, as I've said, the current eradication tools, they're not there. So to me, winning would be holding it, or just, you know, but I accept it will spread a little bit. But yeah, to me, winning would be keeping it from the majority of Hawke's Bay.
Can you just bring that map back up that showed us?
Yeah.
So just to add to that, because we're having this conversation internally a lot, and you're going to get the chance to debate this when we bring you back the plant pest review. For me, we will not be thanked by our neighbours and the nation if we permit that stuff to get throughout the rest of New Zealand. So So yes, it may be increasing in scale in Hawke's Bay. Winning would be that it doesn't leave the region and doesn't end up in those other parts of New Zealand where the impacts will be significant.
Just on that, if I can have something with a question, so if it came in 1930 and it's done this, so it hasn't spread right around the country, and clearly stock has been transferring out of Hawke's Bay and animals' hoofs, and it hasn't got out. So
I guess two things on that. One is there are some spots around the rest of the country where they've found little patches and they've responded and eradicated. Equally, there might not be the knowledge out there of what this grass is. So if you had a true snapshot right now of its current state, it would look slightly different to that. How extensive it actually is, we can tell across the country. But certainly what I will say, to reinforce Alice's comment, if we had done nothing over the last 20 plus years, it would be much more widespread. So the team has worked incredibly hard to slow the spread as much as possible, and done a really good job. And there's a lot of land occupiers out there who are doing a lot of control to try and manage this weed. So we've invested a lot.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay.
Yeah, on that, so you mentioned in your presentation that it only can be identified once it actually starts to seed. A very skilled operator, well trained, can actually spot it before that?
Yeah, so it's easier to identify once it starts putting up its seed, so once it starts piping within the leaf sheath. We can identify it. It is identifiable by just the leaf and the colour. Personally, even though I've worked on it for 12 years, I wouldn't be comfortable going to a farm and going, yes, that's it, when it's not seeding. So technically it can be identified by the leaf. But so with the seed, as soon as it starts piping, if it's sprayed then it's not viable seed. So we've probably got from that piping stage up till it actually sets mature seed. It might be a 3-week window before it actually sets seed. Yeah, so you can tell it earlier than when it's set viable seed.
Okay. And within the river boundary, do we actually actively, as a council, control it?
Yes. So there's private land within that corridor and Crown land, and so contractors are controlling it. Every known plant or every known site in amongst that corridor is sprayed. Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Barker.
Just with this, I think public awareness is really important here. So what are we doing to help promote better public awareness? I'm just thinking, I've had this idea for a while that the council should do a sort of a video thing, a little bit like not TED Talks, Fred Talks, sort of take on Fred Dagg as an explanation with a bit of country type humour about what it is. Because most people wouldn't know what Chilean needlegrass is, wouldn't know what to do with it. But and if anybody wants to know, they go to Google and go to videos or go to YouTube. Do we put stuff up like that as an ongoing program?
Yeah, so we currently have the Pest Hub, which has a Chilean needlegrass section in it, and there are a variety of resources in there. We haven't done a video as yet, but I have been in discussions with the comms team around doing that. Yeah. So that's the video options, definitely.
This is something people look to. So what is it? Someone talks to me and tells you what it is and points it out and
Yes.
how to do it, not do it.
Great
All right.
suggestion. Thank you. There are no other questions. Can we have a mover and a seconder to receive the update? Thank you, Councillor Williams and Councillor Van Beek. Would you like to speak to motion?
Thank you. Just very briefly, look, again, thank you for the incredibly hard work you're doing on this, and particularly managing the different contractors. I just wouldn't mind, I don't think, I'm not entirely clear on the regulatory framework sitting around this under the Biosecurity Act. You talked about notices of direction, there's consents. I'd like to know what our legal levers are around this issue. I do think it's important, as Councillor Graham and Councillor Barker have pointed out. So perhaps if we could get a paper, although it sounds like it's coming anyway, on really how, other than the sort of social ecology of managing communications, we can, through legal tools if necessary, ensure this doesn't get worse.
Thank you. Seconder, would you like to speak? Any other speakers? Fantastic. So the motion's on there to accept and report the update. All that agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Thank you both, and congratulations, Alice.
Thank you.
Fantastic. So we have now the verbal pest management possum control update.
So, Chair, Mark's going to run you through a brief presentation just to update you on where we're at. Just cognizant that we've brought you the Section 17A review last year. We haven't come back to you on what we're doing. This gives you an understanding of what we're up to, and most importantly, at the end of the presentation, an indicative timeline on when you will expect to see more information come to you for this topic. Suffice to say, it's a bit of sweat on Mark's brow because it's a fairly tight and intensive time frame to deliver some solutions here, and Mark will run you through that shortly. I wanted to put this slide up just as some context for you to help perhaps provide a little bit of kind of understanding around why suddenly we're seeing an explosion of rabbits, not only in this region but across the region, why we're seeing increased mustelids in many places, wild feral cats. So pests, both plant and animal pests, are kind of booming across New Zealand at the moment, and this is a part of the reason why. This is the recently released NIWA climate report, which puts in context a longish period of time where, you know, the last 47 months have been higher than average in terms of temperature. So that's right through our summer, autumn, spring and winter periods. So although we may be thinking winters are cold, they're actually warmer than they've been historically for the past 47 months. So if you're a pest, that's great news because you're going to survive those periods that might typically impact your populations. And most significantly is that of the 8 warmest years on record, 6 of them have occurred since 2013. So it all goes to your climate change proposition and why we are actively engaged in a climate change conversation. Biosecurity doesn't escape that because all of the nasties and all the undesirables will benefit from a change in climate and not necessarily in a good way. So that's just kind of perhaps giving you a bit of understanding around why we are suddenly seeing a heck of a lot more pests and predators across New Zealand's landscape. So it's not just Hawke's Bay. And rabbits is a good example where every colleague I talk to across New Zealand has the same issue, that rabbits are in large numbers pretty much all throughout New Zealand. So I'll leave you with that context, let Mark run you through the program, and then we'll take questions.
Thanks, Ian. So Kevin Collins undertook an independent review of our biosecurity and biodiversity functions here at Council, and that was reported to this committee back in September last year. Just to refresh you, the key findings, if you were to summarise them, were sort of 5 areas. The possum control area program, that was certainly one of them. Rabbit control, as Ian has just mentioned. Pest plant management, but a pretty big focus on Chilean needlegrass. Investment in biodiversity, and surveillance, our surveillance and monitoring program. And that was work done where it was benchmarked across all regional councils in New Zealand. So I'll just whip through those 5 topics to give you an update, but I'd like to just point out that we're going to have to take a staged approach to this. We can't review all of them at once. We want to do it properly and thoroughly. So we've kicked it off with the possum control area program, so we've already got a full review of that program underway. Components of that involve varying degrees of engagement with other regional councils, looking at their programs, looking to getting indicative costings for different scenarios from contractors out there. Alongside, we've commissioned a piece of work where we're going to do a survey very soon across 500 landowners within the PCA program to try and gauge their thoughts on the program thus far and the potential for change as well. I just want to also flag with you, look, if we do make a substantial change to the PCA program, which may be the path you guys decide to take, That will require a number of things that we have to do. It's not just council decision. We'll have to go through a formal public consultation process. We'll have to make an amendment to the Regional Pest Management Plan. Therefore, we have to follow the Biosecurity Act, which is a 6-step process. And also, we have to then go back and do amendments to the annual plan process. That's if one of those decisions was chosen to head down that path. I'll come back to that in a slightly more detail in a tick. So some of the other key areas, so rabbit control, look, we don't have a silver bullet for this, and it's a problem that's only likely to grow. So as Ian's mentioned, we're having discussions already with the regional sector via biomanagers to try and look at collectively what we can do, so that conversation is already underway. And as Alice just presented, Chilean needlegrass, look, we acknowledge it's a really difficult pest to manage, so we're going to really unpick that and look at all the options for moving forward. And again, I would flag, if we are to make substantial change to this, it will be the same as the PCA program, requiring significant consultation process and whatnot, because this has direct impacts on land occupiers, and we have to follow the Biosecurity Act review process. The fourth component was investment in biodiversity. So it was signalling that we in their words, were under-investing in biodiversity. So we have put forward a bid in the LTP process, so please support that, councillors, if you can. We that was your pitch. And it's a modest one. But furthermore, look, the MPS on Indigenous biodiversity is due to go through Cabinet July this year. Now, if that does go through, there will be impacts to what we need to do and deliver and resources. So we haven't parked to that, but we will relook at that come July, because that will obviously have a big impact and bearing on that. However, we have put something in the long-term plan in that space. And the final one that was noted in that report was surveillance and monitoring. It's something we would love to be better at. Again, though, as stated in that report, it does require a sector-wide approach to this. And so Ian has already raised this through biomanagers around options for this, but it will be a slower moving piece of work. So just to recap on some of that and looking at timelines. So this is just a look back at September 2020, that's when the Section 70A review was presented. Moving forward, look, we're going to come back in May to do the PCA review and recommendations to this committee. So that's the next committee meeting for here. So we will finish those bits of work prior to that. It then kicks off a bit of a process. So as you know, if you're to make a decision on that, you'd need to go through council. Would then need to go through the public consultation process, presuming it is a substantial change that we choose for the PCA program. Then we will need to go through effectively a 9-month consultation process. That's if we can squeeze it right up. Marlborough District Council have recently undertaken a partial plan review. It took them 18 months and then another 12 months in court through appeals. So it could be quite a drawn out process. If it is a substantive change, we want to make sure we've got it right, we've got the costings right, and that we're engaging with the community and those affected. So that is a rough timeline. We'd love to get this amendments to the program made and becoming operative July 2022, but there is a lot of other factors that come into play here. But certainly the PCA program is one of our main focuses, and alongside the pest plants with Chilean eelgrass. We really want to try and nail those two, and then alongside keep the wheels moving on the other items. So that's it actually, that's the summary.
Brett, just to add before we go to questions, Chair, that to give you an assurance that while this work's happening, the foot has gone flat to the floor on the PCA program and our plant pest, so we've resourced up our plant pest program for the summer, so there's been increased surveillance work that Alice has been involved in and support for that in monitoring in the PCA program. So we're not losing focus on those, we're continuing to push those as hard as we can at the same time these reviews are underway.
Thank you. Thanks for the update, and just keep in mind that they'll come back to us in May as well if we want more in-depth questions to be answered, but for now just short questions about the update. Thank you. Councillor Foss.
Thanks. I've noticed the pampas grass has been sprayed around at least some of the areas I frequent, particularly the pampas grass on public land, Hastings District Council, road margins, so that's great, and I guess some of our land as well. Just with, but going back to the possum job, there and the warmer temperatures and all those kind of things, can you just give us a quick update on any prevalence of the possum count across some of your hotspots in Hawke's Bay, or is that too early for that? But just the ongoing work and then the risks, and we have obviously the ongoing TB outbreak up 2 Teraway, and is there any other corresponding increases in other parts of the country with correlated to the increase in possums, or in particular reference to the challenges that the forestry blocks create for ourselves and possum monitoring?
So I know certainly the forestry aspect is going to be covered off in that review. In regards to possums and a dry environment, I couldn't answer whether that would actually increase their numbers or not. Certainly for some pests like rabbits, probably Chilean needlegrass to be honest too, that will have a positive impact in regards to their populations increasing, not for us. However, possums, I couldn't actually answer that, sorry, in regards to the impact. I can provide you the latest up-to-date monitoring from the PCA program, and I do try and keep you guys updated through the significant activities report.
Yeah, that's fine,
as we
thanks.
have done a lot more targeted monitoring, and we've increased that budget. So you will see more properties coming through that have failed, but that's not necessarily reflective of the entire program. That's taking a really close look at some of them.
Okay, thank you.
But certainly, just so that you're prepared for the discussion, the paper we'll bring you in May's likely to be a fundamental shift in the program. I'm anticipating that there will be some sectors and some industries who will be quite vocally unsupportive of the approach, as well maybe the farming community. So we're going to bring you our advice in terms of the lowest risk, most effective program, and the discussions then going to traverse around costs and benefits.
Sure.
That will be your decisions to make.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Barker.
Just on that paper, are you going to give us a range of options? It seems to me that quite often we look at these things through the assets of ourselves leading this. But when you look at the work that's been done up, for example, on the Mahia Peninsula, those community groups have done a job which is beyond what we could have done ourselves, in my opinion. And circles me back to Councillor Chairman Graham's comment all the time. We can only move forward at the greatest pace with our community. We can't do it ourselves. So I'm just wondering, the philosophy that's underpinning your paper, it seems to me, as you said, it's going to be council driven, which I guess it must be, but are we going to have other options there for us to look at a different model of how we do this?
We can certainly traverse the options for you. I mean, currently there's an owner-occupier model, so it's basically saying let the community get it right and we'll monitor performance and give them a nudge where it needs. Our view would be that's high risk at the moment, and probably high risk into the future. When we look around the country and talk to our colleagues about the work they're doing, a model that has council taking a more active role and running the program has been more successful and has lower risk. There's probably a spectrum in there we can traverse, and we'll think about that. We haven't specifically talked about it, but we'll see what options we can bring to you that look across the range of potential options. But a hybrid model, as far as I'm aware, isn't working anywhere else in New Zealand. It's kind of one or the other.
I guess the only other point I'd make is currently it's occupier responsibility, so the land occupiers are already supposedly doing this work, and it's not necessarily or potentially working as well as we would like. So possums, unlike fencing, you put your fences and you plant your trees. Maintenance isn't too much work, but with predators and possums, it's ongoing. It's continuous every year. So we'll see what the report says, and we can look into that.
Any other questions? No. Could I please have a mover and a seconder to receive the verbal report?
I'll move.
Thank you. Councillor Barker. Seconder. Oh, sorry, Councillor Van Beek. you like to speak, Councillor Barker?
Just to thank the staff for another great report. I enjoy these. It's educative. So thank you for your team, your efforts and your intellect. I appreciate it.
Councillor Van Beek.
Yeah, thank you very much for a very good report, and really look forward to the next steps, because they definitely are very important. And if we, maybe as landowners, we actually have been a bit asleep at the wheel, not knowing that actually this increase in growth was going to happen, and it definitely is noticed. I've got a block of 3.2 hectares which is completely fenced in, and I cannot control the rabbits in it. It's just incredible. And the lollies that we feed them, you know, $500 within 3 months, and it does nothing. You know, it's just incredible. So thank you very much for your good work, and look forward to the next stages and the next steps that you'll...
Any other speakers? Councillor?
Yeah, so I was thinking hard when you were going through your presentation, because I've just had a recent case with myself where I thought I'm same as Sheriff, on 10 acres, lots of high trees, and I thought, I saw one possum and I thought I'm pretty much under control. Since Christmas we've caught 16 possums. And I've asked all my mates, you know, some of the lifestyle blocks and people in the region, you know, I can't just be doing this myself, catching them. And they all say, oh no, I've seen one or two, just like I was before Christmas. So I just wonder, and the rabbits of course, well, we just have to shoot them and that's all there is to it. But the possums cause such a lot of damage, and we noticed our bird life collapsed. And we noticed it's come back within sort of 2 or 3 weeks, it's coming back. So they cause such huge damage, and of course there's the TB issue. And I'm not sure that we have got it under control. I just, my own personal experience since Christmas would tell a very different story.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other speakers?
I'd be just a possum magnet.
Well, we said it, yeah.
No? Okay, right of reply, Councillor Barker? Or said it all, thank you. So all those who agree to receive the update, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those against? Carried. Thank you very much. Committee members, what we're going to do now is bring up item 13 before 12. Apologies, staff. Only because we have a guest here who needs to leave by 12:30. So if I could invite up Jonathan, Amanda and Tom to present the Regional Water Security Program 2021 Engagement Plan. Thank you.
You're going to do it in 10 minutes, I see.
Easy. Oh, thanks. Thanks, Dean.
Chris, would you like to introduce this item, or
I
just
think
leave it to Tom?
everyone knows Tom,
Everyone-
so
yeah.
look, I'll just hand over to Tom and the team.
And welcome, Jonathan. You're leading us to believe Wellington has better weather than us today.
The last couple of days, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Kia ora koutou, committee members. Thank you, Chair. So Jonathan Hill and Amanda Langley, both externals who are supporting the process, and they're both known to you, but for members of the public. We are just going to we'll take the paper as read. What we're proposing to do is just give a 1 minute update for each of the 4 projects that we've outlined in the paper. And then really what we want to focus on is the sort of the engagement plan and project plans for each of the projects. There's a huge amount of work that's sitting in behind this, the information that we've given you in terms of detail of the project, but we just want to give you a sense of how this is going to sequence through the year, and when the decisions are coming on, a little bit like the previous presentation, when we'll be asking for decisions from you, and when this sort of really falls more heavily into the public domain. So it's sort of a bit of a heads up for the year, all things being equally and all things going to plan. And Jonathan's going to, if he disappears out the door at 12:30, it's Air New Zealand's fault. Is that okay? Excellent. So the paper gives a brief summary of where we've come from, an update since we probably last spoke with you, and where we're heading for the year in each of the projects. The regional water assessment, as you'll recall, sort of at its heart aims to quantify our long-term freshwater supply and demand, and we're using an international methodology to do it, and this is the first time. It's a set of regional water accounts. And we've been working hard on that over the summer. The paper does talk to a couple of things that have put pressures on that timeline, but we're hoping to have the sort of draft set of accounts at the end of February 21. Just to move things along, we're working on sort of what we call phases 2 and 3 of that project in terms of setting up some of the, trying to understand some of the projections around supply and demand for water, and also and this is going to particularly involve engagement with key targeted stakeholders around what are the tools that we can use, regulatory, non-regulatory, that can help us achieve a water future that we want. So the next steps we've got up there is we'll be working with HBRC's Murray Partnerships team, to work with treaty partners around a cultural case, which I think is going to be a critical component of the final report. We're going to seek feedback and input from key stakeholders interested in water users, and try and come back to you with an interim report. And that'll probably be more of an internal report in April or May of this year, so that you can sort of see how it's shaping up, see what it's looking like, and then you can probably help guide us in terms of what you think the next steps might be towards the production of a final report later on in the year. So that's the regional water assessment. I'm trying to give myself 1 minute for each of these. No, it's not going to work. Second project, Hiratonga Water Storage. We're continuing landowner engagement around 3 potential sites for small or medium scale storage. Those discussions have been going well and constructively, and we think we're certainly in a position that we feel that we can undertake pre-feasibility around 2 of the sites. So to that end, towards the end of last year, and it spilled over into this year, unfortunately, we've undertaken an RFP for technical services around some of the very core pre-feasibility issues for that dam. So we're just really trying to build the picture for what is possible, what is potentially on the table for solutions. So we're hoping to have the technical pre-feasibility completed around June, July, and then per sort of the program and the commitments we've made to you, we will feed that information into a business case for full feasibility, priority sites, or a priority site, and that again is going to be subject to your decisions as to what solutions you want to explore going forward. And Amanda's going to talk to you about CHB.
Okay, just a reminder that in CHB we're focused on a MAR pilot project. As you would have had Bob Bauer, you may recall Bob Bauer coming from WGA to provide you a presentation on what is MAR, and earlier work that was done back in 2018 through the Science ICM team. So since then, Bob Bauer's team at WGA have been commissioned to effectively do a scoping exercise, which is looking at the various zones across the Ruataniwha Plains to find and select suitable and shortlist suitable MAR pilot sites. That work has been undertaken over the last 6-7 months. They're now at a position where they have identified, if you like, 3 specific sites, costed those out, and we've given direction around a couple of areas that we would like to progress into a more detailed look. Those initial landowner discussions have also occurred at the rear of last year and will continue this year. So the next kind of piece of work for us in CHB is really narrowing down that site securing the land access and having those conversations with the landowners, and then doing the specific, almost feasibility work, if you like, feasibility investigations to move to leading to a resource consent. And that obviously, with any of these projects, involves a significant amount of engagement with the right parties. So as we narrow down that site, then this program of engagement will commence. We'll go on to, so the 3D Aquifer Mapping. So the 3D Aquifer Mapping is a science-led project. We're giving you a quick update and included this in the paper because it was the 4th project under the Regional Water Security Program that we put forward for PGF co-funding. You'll recall that at the beginning of last year, we're very heavily inactive with a aerial survey that was completed in April when we received the data from SkyTeam, and since then it's been a intensive program with GNS Science as a partner in that project to really do the processing and leading to doing interpretation and development of tools for the first data set. First data set that they've been working on is the Pacawa Otani basin data set, being the smallest one of which they could really secure their processes. At the same time, we have been investigating a drilling program, and that drilling program aims to effectively reduce the uncertainties for that interpretation. That is focused on the Ruataniwha and the Hiratonga Plains areas, and that's due to commence shortly. That will be completed around June, July this year. The first data set, the first information that will be ready for discussion and to release some of those findings will be the Pacawa Otani data set, and that's due at the end of February, March. So the science team will be back to speak to you about that at that period of time. It is a multi-year project, so we've got a good 2 years of work to be done around the Ruataniwha and Hiratonga data sets, which will lead to a very good suite of data and materials for understanding our groundwater systems better. And the communication strategy that is to progressively share those findings is also going to be worked on in the early part of this year, and we'd like to feed that into the overall plan, if you like. Over to you.
Great. Thank you very much. Kia ora koutou, and thank you for having me back. Towards the end of last year, we started to talk publicly, the Regional Council started to talk publicly about each of these projects. 2021 will be a year in which there will be significantly more public engagement required across all of them and across the entire program of work. The purpose of this slide in front of you, and Tom has a much more detailed version of this that he is more than happy to hand out, but the purpose of this slide is to highlight the key milestones of the project, the key areas of engagement, and in particular what the program of work may require from the Regional Council. Following the last workshop that I attended, the feedback of Council has been taken, and as we talk about this program of work, we will be taking all care to ensure that it is embedded in the Regional Council's broader program of work. The purpose of the program, is worth repeating, is to deliver long-term, climate-resilient, secure fresh water for all. So it will be embedded in the Council's ongoing work program, it will be embedded in climate change, and as per the National Policy Statement, it will continue to be embedded in the principles of Te Mana o Te Wai. The way I'd encourage you to think about what we're proposing here in terms of engagement is a year of effectively 2 halves. The first half of this year will require a increasing effort around a particularly detailed stakeholder engagement, and what I'm talking about there are, Tom has already discussed the need for a very careful approach to communications with tangata whenua. But also we need to manage relationships with local communities where these projects will be based, neighbours, NGOs, interested parties, water-related lobby groups, and of course we must ensure that we keep the funders of this project and central government up to date as well. At the same time, we'll work closely with the Regional Council Communications team to increasingly generate the context or the why for why this project is continuing. If you look at around about the middle of the year is when public engagement really starts to kick up. And if I start in May, the Managed Aquifer Recharge project to a relatively minor degree front runs the rest of the Regional Water Security Program. The Managed Aquifer Recharge consent application is likely due in May. That will be obviously a public process, and it remains to be seen what form that consent application takes, whether it's notified or non-notified, but there will be a great deal of stakeholder engagement required between now and then. That will also be the time at which the draft regional water assessment report will be, as Tom mentioned, reported to Council. And it's at that point in time that we envisage sharing that draft report with some key stakeholders and making sure that their feedback is taken on board and reflected in the final report. At that point, we also intend to present to you a detailed engagement plan for your approval around how to engage on the final form of the regional water assessment, as that will be a document that will be of keen interest to, I think, every ratepayer and every member of the Hawke's Bay community. If we jump forward to July, the consent decision is likely based on best possible planning for the Managed Aquifer Recharge project, so again more momentum. And then in August I think is the most important month for this entire program of work, and that the regional water assessment is released publicly. And with that, the proposal here is that we at the same time name the preferred Heretaunga water storage sites publicly. So that will be bundled in together for all ratepayers and members of the community to consider. That will kick off a period of sustained community engagement, and also over that period of August, Managed Aquifer Recharge project should start construction, and in October that particular project is anticipated to be commissioned. So these are all public milestones that provide opportunities for deep public engagement. And all of this feeds through into eventual council decisions following that period of public engagement around what actions this council chooses to take around the options presented in the regional water assessment and in the work that this team will present around future water security options. So I wanted to put that in front of you so that there's no surprises in terms of how we're thinking about the year, and ask for your feedback and thoughts on how that lands for you.
Thank you. And because you have to go, so more direct questions.
I've got plenty of time.
Okay,
Thanks,
fantastic.
Councillor.
So we might start, if that's okay, Tom. Questions to Jonathan, particularly around the engagement plan that he's presented. Any questions? Councillor Williams.
Yeah, look, thanks for the update. I just had a sense for Heretaunga that one of the potential sites was ahead of the others and had gone beyond pre-feasibility into feasibility, or had it gone beyond scoping into pre-feasibility, which there were three candidates, one of which I thought we decided was in a stage ahead of pre-feasibility. Is that right or wrong?
Yeah, so look, so those discussions are still ongoing. I think whatever the outcome is that when we come to you, for recommendations for further work, one site might be, we might know more about that site than the other, but certainly no decisions taken beyond, or no commitments to a site.
No, it's just simply, it's not a cryptic question at all, Tom. I thought we'd already gone beyond pre-feasibility for one of them.
So we have, and we're advancing the work in one of the sites further than the others, but with an intention that when you come to make your decision about a preferred site, you have all three options, hopefully, before you.
To be able to sort of play catch-up kind of thing?
Somewhat, yes.
Can I just make a comment for the governance team? What would be really helpful is we get a lot of papers, workshops, committees, council, and on water security, for example, I quite often have to spend quite a bit of time going back through it. Was it that one? No, it was that one. No, it was this one. I know this had come up. It would be really good if we could get a spreadsheet, a rolling spreadsheet that every month told us what topics were discussed in what workshop on a sort of calendar basis. So if I'm looking at water security, I go, it was the May workshop, it was the September EICC, it was the September corporate strategic, it was the November council meeting, and I can go straight into them. Yeah, that's just a general comment. It would make it really useful for getting that backstory and sort of history to these processes. The other part of this, just a question, is that I noticed from this, we and Roger and I supported a motion to have a sort of a governance group oversee or a panel, a community panel I think it was called, oversee the regional water assessment. The minutes record that was just simply adjourned.
Correct.
So your response to this is this revised process where in effect you're doing that with stakeholder engagement yourselves, informally to give us the draft report, and then there'd be another step of stakeholder engagement before we get the final report. Is that the idea?
Yeah, that's correct, and that's so effectively we've tried to cut the project down, get you cited on on what it's looking like, and then we'll put to you almost revisit that decision as soon as you can around how you want that governance to look going forward.
I think it's absolutely critical that we have community buy-in to the outcomes and that we've involved the stakeholders who are going to be interested in anything to do with storage on the back of it. That they feel that they have been heard and their voice and their perspective has contributed to the outputs of that study if we're going to make any progress here.
Councillor Barker.
On an administrative point, I just want to follow up and ask the question of the Chief Executive. It relates to the point that Martin made about keeping track of papers. I ran a campaign for quite a while to have every paper come up with a purpose, so when you went to read the paper, you knew what the start was, so you didn't have to figure it out at the end. The other thing I've been hot on is making sure the papers have linkages. So I think it'd be very helpful if we had a standard practice of when the purpose is written out, what the purpose of the paper is, the purpose also links back to papers that have gone before. This is in addition to the papers, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. And if there are future papers, to say there'll be 2 or 3 papers coming ahead of this on this. Because I do remember getting trapped on one occasion by a paper coming through, and we were not alerted that there were 2 other decisions coming down the track. If we had known there were 2 other decisions coming down the track, we would have reassessed the essence of the paper. So we're making the decision based on only one. So could we have that as a standard practice, that purpose clause is set out there, purpose is set there, and then there's a little wee paragraph that sets out the linkages to what has been before or what's coming, what might be coming future. It would just help governors when they're reading the papers to keep track. It's kind of a similar theme to what Martin was doing.
I think that should be doable. It's just a hyperlink, obviously, to the existing papers that sit within Stella, so that would make it easier for you to navigate. So that we can certainly do that. In terms of upcoming papers or papers related, that will require a little bit more proactively by the authors of the paper to consider the broader context. We're working on some guidance right now. The governance team is for the whole organisation to improve the preparation of papers. So we'll feed that into that piece of work and make sure that authors are reminded of the need to provide that forward-looking context as well.
Outstanding. And the other thing you should say to the authors that they are to be our guides on this. They are the central part of it. They have the information and they're to be our guide, so they help us. We can't see it from outside. They are at the centre of it. So they get that perspective.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I just redirect us to Jonathan and what he presented, because he will have to go. So if there are any direct questions to his part of the presentation?
We're all very delighted with Jonathan.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan.
That's great.
He's like, no. But no, you've done a great job.
Another great job again.
Thank you.
Another 100 million in our bank account.
Can I claim that? Wow, amazing. Like I said, Tom does have a much more, this is deliberately very high level, Tom does have a much more detailed step through on a month-by-month basis as to what we're proposing, if you'd like to see it.
Could I just ask a question? Back up the truck a bit. This is probably one of the most important issues facing our province. Rex makes this point over and over again.
Yes.
So on that, given that we need to be taking our people with us, do you think we've got sufficient, material going into social media, the normal media, etc., to make sure that people are aware of what's happening here and taking with? I'm just not sure we've quite.
Well, I'd say, so what we're really working towards is providing you as decision makers with the opportunity for an informed community debate. And so we're trying to, and we see that as being, the work that comes together and the information that we have on August to sort of to set that scene.
And Councillor Barker, the way I hear your question is, can we be doing more now to set the groundwork for this work to land in the right context? And I think the answer to that is yes.
That's exactly the question.
And that is the work that I will be working on with the Hawke's Bay Regional Council's team in terms of its broader program of work, and that I glossed over when I mentioned the broader context. So I think the answer is yes.
And we're going to see details of that, how that's going to be undertaken shortly.
If you'd like, yes.
Thank you.
We have Councillor Foss and then Councillor Graham.
Thank you. Just one question. Just first, the managed aquifer recharge, that's a trial you hope to have underway in October, December this year, which goes for 2 to 3 years, right? Okay, thanks. Earlier today we had information on the hottest, the increase in temperatures across New Zealand and Hawke's Bay for the last 7 years, which poses a large threat to the productive economic engine room for the region. And in your paper, I'm particularly struck by the urgency under your climate change narrative there of all the reasons that we need to do something, to get something underway to have water secured. We have been talking about this issue for quite some time. And then as I look at it, so Hiratonga hopefully will have something of certainty, at least one of your 3 proposals underway, I think, by early next year, but I think.
Feasibility.
Feasibility, but at that stage it's just hopefully, so we have certainty, we have a pathway to something being built and water above ground being stored. On the Ruataniwha Plains, we'll have after 3 years a trial of a managed aquifer recharge, which may or may not be successful. 3 years after, and probably 6 or 7 years after we declared a climate change, or this council declared a climate change emergency, which has got even more heat has gone into that issue, as you've got in your report. So is there anything at all on the table where we can, and with total respect, I know you're carrying out the wishes of this council, where we can provide a quicker pathway or more certainty to action, potentially above ground in Ruataniwha Plains, Central Hawke's Bay Plains, or have we exhausted all of those options and we're just waiting for the result of the MAR trial?
Look, it's a really challenging question, Councillor.
Leading you to
we do note in the paper, we put down some project risks in terms of the a number of things that can push this time frame around, or all these project work streams around, and that's that's the daily grind we live. Look, one of those is government policy, changes in government policy, and I suppose my response is that could change in one of 2 directions. It could harden towards storage, or it could soften towards storage. And I've seen some work that's been done that is revisiting that. So in terms of the in the absence of a direction otherwise, that's the program that we're working towards.
Sure, and that's fine. And then just further to Councillor Barker's earlier point about linking bits of paper, quite some time ago we did send a letter pursuant to Councillor Williams' motion a while ago now, and if you could just refresh us at some stage, not right now, as to the results of that letter and the response you got to it. If you can have that for the next meeting, or just share that with councillors, that would be great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah, sorry.
I
Councillor.
did have one, but Craig stole my thunder, really.
I know where you're going.
So we've solved the issues of Heratonga, really. It's quite an easy program to be able to solve those issues. We have a few roadblocks,
Nobody on this side of the
but
table.
they're just roadblocks. They're just roadblocks, and we'll get there. Central Hawke's Bay is a much bigger challenge, huge big challenge. And I'm actually a big fan of aquifer recharge, and I think it's not an experiment. It's proven all around the world, and we'll be able to do it, and we'll be able to do it well. But in your view, Tom, and this is very loaded, is it sufficient to actually capture the real value that we need to capture in Central Hawke's Bay? Are we going to be able to have enough water to really capture what we need to capture and grow Central Hawke's Bay, especially into horticulture, aquifer? Even if it's successful, don't we have to start to look at some of these other solutions?
So, look, perhaps naively, the regional water assessment is going to try to address that and talk, because, in a times of abundance, water allocation is pretty straightforward. You just allocate it on a first in, first served basis. As we move, to a period through, changes in supply and demand, that water, is fully allocated, then, the pressure comes on those sorts of decisions, and perhaps council gets pushed into decisions where it starts prioritising around water use. And so, so we hope through the regional water assessment to tell that story about, in the absence of solutions, in the absence of, we can always, the regional council has been working for years around demand management and has been working for years around, increasing supply, but increasing supply of water in New Zealand has actually been very, very challenging. There hasn't been many successful projects, and so that shifts the focus on to demand management and some of the very tricky questions that we'll probably throw back to you as decision makers to give some guidance on.
I'm sure you answered my question, but it was very clever round Tom.
But you told him not to, because this is very challenging.
Any other questions?
Here's a question to Dodge.
Okay, well, thank you all for coming. And just to reiterate how complex I think it is, all four of them are complicated in their own right, but hugely important for our future and making sure that we have water for all. So, kia ora, thank you. If we can please have a mover and a seconder of the update. Councillor Graham and Councillor Foss, would you like to speak? Councillor Foss?
No, thank you. Go well.
Okay. Any other speakers? Councillor Williams.
Yeah, just to remind, thank you, in light of the point just made by Councillor Graham, that the corporate and strategic meeting on the 2nd of September last year, we agreed not to progress a business case for above-ground storage for Central Hawke's Bay, but to progress cost and benefit analysis of smaller scale storage sites and the pilot study. So we put the brake on. This council did it. No one else. And yeah, I'm alive to the concern. Reference back to ice ages, I think, Councillor Barker.
Right of reply? No. Okay then, we'll put that to the table. We all receive this report. Say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Good job.
Storage.
Thank you. One more item, and thank you for waiting so patiently. Our last item is the Farm Environment Management Plan update.
Sorry? Meeting, have lunch and go.
So, Chair, there's no introduction required. Brendan and Kate will just step you through. This is just a rolling update on where we're at on this important piece of work. So the team will run you through progress and updates.
Okay.
Just a minute. Gallery. Tom. Thank you. Take your hui out there. Awesome. Thank you. Carry on. Sorry, Ian. Oh, Brendan.
Thank you.
Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou. So You see myself and Kate here today because we're currently in the process of replacing a couple of vacant positions in the FEMP, Farm Environmental Management Plan space. Just to highlight some of the key points in the paper, I don't have a PowerPoint, it's a fairly brief paper, so I'll just point out some of the key points. Farm Environmental Management Plans, FEMPs, and the Tuki catchment were first due 3 years ago, and they have to be updated and reviewed every 3 years. So we're coming up to two important deadlines. The first one, 26th of February, so later this month, when 200 are due to come in associated with consents that people require, so accompanying those consent applications, and then the remainder, around 870, to come in by the 31st of May this year. So it's quite a critical time. Landowners have been well informed of the deadlines and the requirements, but based on the best information we have now, it's unlikely that all landowners are going to meet those requirements on time, so it's just flagging that up. But there will be continued communications leading up to these dates, and there's a plan for regulatory compliance follow-up once we're past those dates. Taking a step back from the regulatory requirements, the next stage in the development of this project is getting the auditing underway, which is a critical part of giving feedback to farmers and farm plan providers to improve the quality of plans and to improve people's understanding of the catchment issues and the right actions to be taken on farm to address those issues. Then the last point that I'll make is, in the national picture, this is something that's going to be required everywhere. So as part of the essential freshwater package of reforms, farm plans will be required nationally, and the details of the regulations associated with this will be further developed through this year. There is a national farm plan working group and regional councils and have been doing work on that, and people from HBRC have been involved closely in that working group. So that's the main points, I think. Open to questions and discussion.
Thank you. Any questions? Bill Foley.
Just on the, well, you said it was unlikely all those FEMPs are going to come in by the due date. So what are you basing that on? And secondly, could we, well, yeah, do you want to answer that first and then I'll ask the next question?
Yeah, so it is quite hard because we don't know what's out there. But Shane, who was here previously and was managing the project, was in constant contact with farm plan providers, and through the year they really needed to be busy to get all those farm plans done, and they were reporting that they had spare capacity. We know currently that those farm plan providers are sitting on plans that they haven't submitted to us yet, but the numbers that they're talking about are not 1,000.
Yeah. So, like often it is with things like this, there's going to be a mad rush, right? So, and there's 1,070. So could we structure it better so we stagger the dates due? Say, do, I don't know, sub-catchment by sub-catchment or something that means then 1,000 aren't all due on this date. Spread that due date out.
Yeah, so unfortunately in the Tuki plan we have one date where they're required, and we just have to implement the plan.
The dates for consent are staggered out though, so the people that need their consent application in by the end of this month, they would have to update their FEMP for their consent application. So 200-ish will be due before May, so that staggers it out a little bit.
I think if I just make the observation that we have consistently communicated with landowners the risk of leaving it late and them not being able to get a slot with a farm plan provider, and the need for them to therefore be proactive in that regard. We haven't seen a lot of receptivity to that messaging, and I would put that down in large measure to the lack of consequences, and we are moving, and we will move this year to a much stronger regulatory and enforcement approach to this, including the resource consents, but also those who will be non-complying because they won't have an up-to-date farm plan. And when we start taking enforcement action, and we're talking fines and then prosecutions, I would expect to see, we'll see behaviour change. It's disappointing that we'll have to resort to that, but all signs at this point lead us to conclude that we will be taking significant amount of enforcement action in this catchment.
Sorry, Councillor Foss, did you have a question?
No.
Oh, no, sorry, Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Kia ora. Kia ora. Just get my head around the numbers here. I read last council meeting that there were 7 properties that hadn't provided an FEMP. Is that at all as was due in 2018?
Correct, and there's been some update on that.
Yeah, there has been. I can't say super accurately, but I know that we've got 3 left that don't have a FEMP.
So they're 3 years out of time, basically.
Yes.
And they're almost caught up to the time where they need to do an update,
Yes.
which is May this year. And what you're saying in here is for those that aren't doing production land use consents, they need to put in a summary ahead of the full revision. Is that what you're telling? I just wanted to understand.
The summary is the information they give to us after they update their FEMP. We don't hold the FEMPs in-house. They update their FEMP and they put it through an online form to us, and then we hold the summary information that then shows that they've updated their FEMP.
Right, so what they'll need to do by May this year is put in the summary by way of an explanation of their update.
That's right.
Cool, thank you.
Any other questions? Great. I have a mover and a seconder to receive the verbal update. Right. Thank you. We have a mover and a seconder. Thank you. Would you like to speak?
Oh, thank you very much for your hard work.
All those who agree,
I
say
will
aye.
speak.
Oh, that was
Need to be
10
quicker.
seconds too
A bit slow
late.
there.
Sorry, that Councillor Graham.
It's just simple to me. You know, we've got to do farm plans. We've got to do them legally. The government's going to force us to do farm plans anyway. If there are some farmers who are refusing to do them, we've just got to take them to court. There isn't a choice here. So, you know, we can't have people not doing what they're supposed to do. Simple as that.
Any other speakers?
Tough it up.
You got the message. Okay. All those who agree, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those against? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kia ora. So that's us. There's no discussion for minor items, so we will close with a karakia. Or are we brave enough to go without cards or words? So if you need them, we'll go to the grey card, I think it is. Kia tau.
Okay.
Will, would you like to start us off?
So number 1 is it? Kia tau, kia tātou katoa. Te ata whai o tātou ariki a hiu karati. Me te aroha o te atua. Me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua tapu. Amen.
Okay, amene. Kia ora, thank you, Bill. Thank you, councillors.
Can I
James.
just ask councillors, as many